Imagine waking up one morning, your bank card still works, your paycheck still hits, but the dollars in your account buy half what they did last year, maybe less. Oh, but the world didn't end. Your money just quietly died. Welcome to the silent economic collapse, a slow motion train wreck that almost no one in DC wants to talk about. So, eight economic time bombs are ticking at the same time. And even if one goes off, it could drag the others down with it. Interest on the U.S. debt is now bigger than the Pentagon's budget. We're literally paying more to service all spending than to defend this country. And that's not just bad policy, that's national suicide on leeway. Huh. Anyway, so, hey folks, this is Greg with Green Rigs. And this is where we talked about gardening, grid down, news that matters, and how not to get steamrolled when the financial system face plants. In this video, we're going to break down 8 convergent economic risks that could push the United States into full-blown economic catastrophe. And for my friends in other countries, you're about the same boat. And if the United States economy sinks, you know the world's in trouble. So this is really a message for everyone. I just did the research, more U.S.-centric, as most of my viewers are here in the U.S., and we do have special economic challenge. Okay, number one, the new BRICS gold-anchored unit and the slow-motion attack on the U.S. dollar. 2, a wildly overvaluated stock market sitting on an AI bubble. 3, a 38 plus trillion national debt with interest now bigger than defense. 4, state and city debt bombs. 5, record household debt and squeezed consumers. 6, commercial real estate on life support. 7, a potentially fragile housing market. 8, soft socialism in City Hall, price controls, especially rent control. Any one of these is bad. All of them together, oh, that's how you fall into an economic abyss. Stick with them in the end because I'll cover what the U.S. government could do if it ever sobered up and what you can do. Practical steps to protect your family, your food, and your freedom. Guys, and also at the very, very end, I got a special treat. I'm going to do a little rhyme I made up on this context, okay? So, hey, if this video doesn't at least double my views, I might have to start selling prepper flavored OnlyFans. So you don't want that. So smash that like button instead. No, I don't think I'll do that. But hey, you know, that would be horrible. Anyway, segment 1, BRICS unit versus the dollar, a new monetary battlefield. Let's start with the one that everyone is yelling into the dollar on the internet over. What is the BRICS unit? The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus some new add-on nations, has rolled out a prototype digital trade instrument called the unit. It is a gold-anchored digital settlement currency for cross-border trade. Basically a digital trade chip, not a consumer wallet. So this is not for the consumers directly. Anyway, the proposal uses a basket of assets backed 40% by physical gold and 60% by BRICS currencies like the yuan, the ruble, the rupee, etc. It's built on blockchain rails and designed so it isn't easily centrally vetoed like SWIFT, avoiding the kind of sanctions and freezes the U.S. used on Russia. Now you can guess why the rest of the world is so interested in this now, right? Important detail. Some analysts emphasize that the unit isn't a normal currency like a dollar or euro. It's a settlement instrument for governments, central banks, and big companies. Not for buying groceries? Well, at least not yet, according to Fisher Investments. So why does this matter? Right now, the US dollar is still the world's main reserve currency. It is still the trade invoicing currency and the main funding currency for global debt, yeah, especially since we hold so much of it, right? This gives the United States enormous power, and it lets Washington borrow insane amounts of money because the world needs dollars. And that's what they're trying to change, my friends. If a gold-anchored BRICS unit becomes a serious alternative for settling oil, gas, and commodity trades, some countries will hold fewer dollars in treasuries. Demand for dollars and U.S. bonds, method we use to finance that insane debt, fails at the margin. And that's just a polite way of putting it. We have to offer we would have to offer higher interest rates to attract buyers to our bonds. Higher rates causes bigger interest bills, and that raises our already huge debt. See, this stuff can snowball. And remember, as of late 2025, the U.S. gross national debt is actually around $38.4 trillion, rising over $1 trillion in just a few months. It's like Washington maxed out 10 credit cards and then found out the bank is talking about cutting up the 12th or 11th one. Excuse me. So how big a threat is this really? And for the reality check, the dollar still dominates global reserve and trade. The unit is in its early stage and limited to BRICS trade pilots. BRICS countries don't fully trust each other, thank gosh. And some have capital controls and unstable currencies. So this isn't a dollar dies tomorrow scenario, but it is a trend signal. If we weaponize the dollar with sanctions and then refuse to get our financial house in order, we slowly push the world toward alternatives. And yes, we have weaponized the dollar. And that is why the world is heading in this direction. What's at stake for Americans? If the global demand for dollars falls over time, higher inflation at home. If we keep monetizing debt, you think that's going to change? Tell me below if you think it is in the comments. Higher interest rates to sell treasuries. Weaker purchasing power for everyday Americans. Like we don't already have issues with that now, right? Anyway, so segment 2. The Schiller and Buffett, the overvalued warning lights on our stock markets. Now, yeah, let's talk about the stock market, aka Wall Street's casino, but not with better lighting. The Shiller-Cape ratio, aka Shiller P/E. Cape is the cyclically adjusted price to earnings. It is the price of the S&P 500 divided by inflation adjusted average earnings over the last 10 years. Historically, normally it's in the low 20s. Normally in the low 20s. It spiked above 40 just before the dot-com crash around 2000. As of late 2025, estimates put the Shiller-Cape near high 30s to around 40, which is historically very elevated, and in the same number, in the same neighborhood as big bubbles. And you know what bubbles do? Pop, and that ain't good. When your valuation gauge is back to, it's back in the irrational exuberance territory, that's usually not the market saying, relax, bro, this time it's different. And you know what? That's what they keep telling us about some of these economic indicators. Oh, this time it's different. But they've said that every time in the past. And then, pop, Anyway, so the Buffett indicator, that's market cap to GDP. This is the total value of all U.S. publicly traded stocks divided by the U.S. gross domestic product, the GDP. Warren Buffett once said, it's probably the best single measure of where valuation stands. Yeah, he's walked away from it a bit, but his name is still stuck to it forever. Long-term average is roughly 80 to 100%. Over 120 to 140% is considered overvalued. I'm going to repeat that. Long-term average, roughly 80 to 100. Anything over the 120 to 140 is considered overvalued. As of December, this month, 2025, estimates have the U.S. Buffett indicator around 220 to 225%, labeled by some analysts as significantly overvalued. This means that the stock market is worth more than twice the size of the U.S. economy, the entire U.S. economy. Now, do you think it makes sense that the stock market is worth over twice the size of the entire U.S. economy? If you think so, tell me in the chat below, in the comment section. And we got other factors that work into this stock market scare we got here. The Magnificent Seven and the AI bubble. You've heard me mention this in a previous video. A huge share of marketing gains is concentrated in a handful of mega caps, tech, AI names, the so-called Magnificent Seven. This is Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, which owns Google, Amazon, NVIDIA, the Meta platform, we know as Facebook, and Tesla. Their evaluations assume massive sustained AI profits. Huge data centers, then it assumes that huge data center spending actually pays off. But there's a catch. Yes, these firms are spending hundreds of billions on AI chips, data centers, and energy upgrades. They often depreciate hardware over 5 years on paper, but AI acceleration means it may be technically obsolete in 1 to 3 years. If revenue doesn't scale to justify that capex, those assets become stranded, far less available than the models assume. They are spending hundreds of billions and only earning tens of billions. And a huge share of that is from paperwork sleight of hand of depreciation assets over 5 years. So earnings look great now because of accounting choices and because we're early in the hype cycle. If that profit story disappoints, think about these things. The AI bubble could deflate hard, taking indexes and entire retirement accounts down with it. It may rhyme with the 2000s.com crash, but the 2008 housing bubble.com was, from 2000 to 2002, and 2008 was a home mortgage crisis. I'm going to get on that in a little bit. So just hang on for that one because we got some things factoring there too. So what's at stake? A sharp bear market could hit pensions, 401ks, and state retirement systems. State and local finances tend to, they tried capital gains and high income tax receipts, but they can get whacked. So that's what they're tied to quite often. Capital gains and high income tax receipts, but all that can get knocked. People close to retirement may see portfolio values plunge right when they need the money. So when your retirement system depends on a cartoon dog logo like Doge and a GPU shortage, maybe that's not a stable system. Segment 3, the federal debt, the $38.4 trillion debt, which is climbing rapidly. So let's talk about the big daddy of risk, the U.S. federal debt. By November 3rd, 2025, gross national debt had hit about $38 trillion. Treasury reports were since then around $38.4 trillion in total public debt as of late November. So we're talking early November, November 3rd to late November. You see it just going up. And these are brought to you by the Habtour Research Center and Physical Data Plus One. You can research these guys, man. Debt to GDP is now over 120%. We're talking federal debt now, not the valuation of the stock market, which is 220, 225% up. Different things are related to the GDP. Interest versus defense. Now, here's the worrying part. In fiscal year 2025, net interest payments on the national debt were about $970 billion. Polite way of saying a trillion, right? So that's more than we spent on our national defense, which was around $917 billion. So now we pay more to service our old debt than to fund our U.S. military. And look at the challenges we're facing. At this point, the biggest threat to national security is in the interest line in the federal budget. That is our biggest threat to national security. So, CBO projections, that's Congressional Budget Office, and other analysis shows the net interest will keep growing faster than the economy, exceeding $1 trillion per year soon and totaling nearly $14 trillion over the next decade. I'm not talking about national debt. I'm talking about the interest. Let me re-say this to you. The net interest will keep growing faster than the economy. This is what we're paying in interest rates, exceeding $1 trillion per year soon and totaling nearly $14 trillion over the next decade. If nothing changes, that's what's coming. Interest is projected to be the second largest line item in the budget after Social Security. When does it become the biggest one? What's at stake? For the U.S. government, less room to spend on defense, infrastructure, research, space, AI, and everything else. Growing temptation to inflate away the debt by eroding the dollar's value. You talk Weimar inflation. The risk of confidence crisis in treasuries if investors demand higher yields or start to reduce exposure. For citizens, you and me, higher taxes, fewer services, or both. Maybe real high taxes and no services. Slower economic growth as government crowds out private investment. Higher inflation risk as politicians try financial repression tricks, which usually result in disaster. You know, those guys up there in the halls of Congress, they ain't the brightest lights on the Christmas tree. Take it from Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho. Anyway, and this all sits on top of massive unfunded obligations and Social Security and Medicare. Segment 4. States and cities and sub-sovereign time bombs. That's what this is. The federal government is alone in overspending. According to data summarized in public sources, the U.S. states, local governments together carry around $3 trillion in bonded debt. That's roughly five. And again, on top of that, $5 trillion more in unfunded pensions and retiree health benefits. In plain English, what's this boil down to? Many public pensions are underfunded. Do you depend on one of these? They depend on rosy stock market assumptions to stay solvent. We kind of started looking at the stock market thing a little bit, then it doesn't look too rosy to me. If the market drop, pension holes widen, forcing either to higher taxes, benefit cuts, or more borrowing, which just compounds the problem. So compare this with shrinking tax bases in some cities, out migration from high tax, high crime areas, and rising cost of healthcare and benefits. and you get the possibility of a Detroit-style financial crisis spreading to other municipalities. Take a look at Detroit. Compare it to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In the mid-1940s, Detroit was booming. Those cities were rubble, dust, radioactive. Now they're booming. And Detroit is what? Rubble. Uh, yeah, it's like a game of musical chairs, except the chairs are the taxpayers. And they're all out moving to Texas and Florida to get out of those cities. Can you blame them? Segment 6. No, excuse me, this is segment 5. We're going to 8. Household record debt and squeeze consumers. Now let's zoom in on the individual level. The New York Fed's latest household debt and credit report shows that the total U.S. household debt reached $18.59 trillion in Q3 of 2025, a record high, up $197 billion in just one quarter. Mortgage balances are a piece of that, about $13.07 trillion. Credit card debt is around $1.23 trillion, also at a record. Overall delinquency rates are elevated, with about 4.5% of debt in some stage of delinquency. On top of that, a Harvard-linked study cites several recently found that 65% of working-age U.S. renters struggle to afford basic living expenses after paying rent. The rent is eating everything. Your housing was only supposed to cost a quarter of everything. So what's happening? Wages. Well, wages have risen, but housing, health care, food, and insurance have risen faster. Higher interest rates make variable debt and new borrowing more expensive. Gotta watch that variable rates, my friends. Many households are living month to month with little to no emergency savings. You got no room. Something happens, it's a catastrophe, anything. Why this matters for the broader economy? The U.S. is a consumer-driven economy. If consumers are tapped out, spending slows, businesses cut back, recession risk rise. You see these things like a chain reaction. They build and feed on each other. And a shock, job losses, market crash, or inflation spike, defaults can spike and stress the banking system. That's another polite way to put it. Segment 6, commercial real estate, zombie offices, and default risk. Now let's walk through the American downtowns, or what's left of them, especially like Detroit. Detroit, Rock City. Post-COVID, vacancy rates in major U.S. cities have hit about 20% nationally, with some cities reporting much worse. At the same time, commercial mortgage-backed securities, CMBSs, and office delinquencies have reached record highs, with estimates around 11 to 12% in late 2025, higher than during the 2008 crisis. I said it was getting to 2008, didn't I? So you see, boy, you talk about a convergence of train wrecks. So you've got buildings that aren't full, loans coming due at higher rate environment. In a higher rate environment, the loans are coming due. Failing commercial real estate property values are falling. Owners can't refinance easily. Banks and bondholders are sharing potential losses. The values are, they got to pay these things, and yet the values are dropping. Why this matters? Well, banks, especially regional banks, carry a lot of commercial real estate exposure. These are like the guys you like to use, your regional banks, right? If default spikes, bank balance sheets weaken, lending tightens, and we risk a credit crunch that hits small businesses and households. That's you and me. And who employs most people? Who creates most jobs? Small businesses. But they're being squeezed hard now. Think of it as 2008's cousin. Not a subprime mortgage this time, but office and retail properties. It's just hitting in a different sector. Uh, well, when your local bank's biggest customer is an empty building, that's not great. Segment 7, housing bubble or just brutal affordability? Reality is a little bit more complicated. Home prices surged after 2020 and remain high relative to incomes. Most of you know this all too well. Mortgage rates jumped, making monthly payments painful, especially for recent buyers. I've done a video on just this housing cost problem. Many homeowners who locked in 2 to 3% rates, which sounds great, except they are rate locked and they won't sell because they can't afford new mortgage rates at 6 to 7%. It isn't exactly like 2008. Well, probably not. Lending standards are generally higher. We don't have the same volume of no doc liar loans and exotic subprime products, but the risk. If unemployment rises or inflation stays sticky, which is really looking like it with all these things we're talking about here, some highly leveraged homeowners could walk away or default, just like in 2008. So we got commercial real estate, CRE, and home owner mortgages that we've got to worry about here. A wave of forced selling in certain regions could cause local price crashes. Combined with CRE, again, commercial real estate stress, and consumer debt, housing problems could amplify a broader downturn. So maybe not a carbon copy of 2008, more like a slow burn affordability crisis that can still trigger local bursts. Well, rent control and soft socialism in inner cities. This is our last segment, segment 8. Finally, let's talk about policy reactions, especially rent control and similar measures. Hey, it sounds good on the surface. Yeah, let's cut the cost. Many U.S. cities are flirting with or expanding rent caps, rent control, strict eviction rules, owner price controls on housing, or other house controls on housing. Economic research on rent control is actually pretty consistent. Rent control does slow rent growth for people already in controlled units, but it often leads to lower housing supply, less new construction, and worse housing quality. Why? Because a squeezed landowner who isn't making money is not going to be improving his properties. Can you say ghettos? Anyone? Higher rents in uncontrolled units. That's the other thing that you're going to get. And this was, found in the California YIMBY plus 6 Science Direct plus 6 Beckons plus 6 study. Anyway, for example, one well-known study on San Francisco's rent-controlled expansion found landlords reduced the controlled rental supply by about 15%, causing citywide rents to increase 5% overall. So yes, rent control helps some tenants in the short run, but it discourages investment in rental housing. It can cause deterioration and disinvestment, and over time can reduce total supply and raise average rents. In other words, good intentions lead to bad system-wide results. It's like you're trying to cure obesity by putting padlocks on the grocery store doors. Technically, few people buy food, but I'm not sure we've solved the real problem here. Combine rent control with everything else, high construction costs, high interest rates, high land and regulatory controls, and I got a video on housing costs where I already talk about the regulatory controls. I'll show you the link later. And you can get frozen housing markets and more pressure on renters. So much for these politicians, what they promise you. Oh my gosh. Polyticks, mini ticks, mini bloodsuckers. Anyway, how these 8 different risks feed on each other. The doom loop. So let's connect the dots. BRICS unit and de-dollarization lead to less appetite for U.S. debt. Higher rates. Higher rates lead to higher interest costs on that 38.4 plus trillion dollar debt. More deficits, more borrowing, like a snowball, right? Higher rates also lead to stress on households, commercial real estate, CRE, and housing, and loans roll over. A stock market correction from elevated Shiller Cape and Buffett levels hits pensions and state finances. States and cities under pressure respond with tax hikes and controls that push businesses and residents away. They get less revenue in the long run. Consumers already stretched with record household debt, cut spending, deepen the downturn. Remember, we're a consumer-based economy. Political gridlock prevents serious reform. So the default policy becomes more borrowing and more money creation, more debt, more interest, inflation. That's your economic abyss. Not one big asteroid spike, but multiple smaller impacts that weaken the structure until something snaps. So, what could the U.S. government do if it were sane? Well, I'm not holding my breath, but if we had a rational adults in the room, here are some realistic steps, and we're going to go to the personnel, what you can do later in just a little bit. Multi-year fiscal stabilization plan. Set binding caps on spending growth below a nominal GDP unit. If you think our government can do that, tell me so in the comments below, at least as it is right now. Use 10 to 15-year glide path to stabilize debt to GDP and then slowly reduce it. Well, wouldn't that be great? This means slower growth in discretionary spending. Oh, poor politician, including defense and domestic. Reform on entitlements, Social Security, Medicare, to make them solvent over decades, not just the coming election cycles. Investment cost management. Lengthen the average maturity of U.S. debt when possible to lock in rates. Avoid sudden, huge insurance spikes that scare markets. Issuance spikes, not insurance. Avoid sudden, huge issuance spikes, like how much bonds you put out at one time. Stop pretending interest isn't a problem. I always like to pretend everything's not a problem and I'm going to blow more money, right? It's already larger than defense. The interest is larger than defense and projected to crowd out everything. So pro-growth, not just austerity. There's other ways to get around this. Deregulate bottlenecks in energy, housing, and infrastructure to boost real growth. Look how fast they can build bridges in just weeks in China, although they do tend to fall apart, as opposed to years here in the United States. How we used to build ships and things so fast, now we can't seem to build anything here. Simplify tax codes, especially for productive investments in small businesses. Encourage innovation and manufacturing at home instead of relying on fragile overseas supply chains. Because we got a little bit of a labor shortage, we probably want to put more money in robotics too. Growth doesn't fix everything, but stagflation guarantees pain. Real housing reform instead of price controls. Fast track zoning reforms and allow more building, especially in high demand cities. These zoning reforms, a lot of these certifications that private small builders got to go through, that stuff needs to go out the window. And you're going to have to fight City Hall to make that work. Anyway, streamline permitting. Reduce not in my backyard, NIMBY barriers, and focus on supply instead of just capping prices. That's what you need. Free market reforms is what we're talking about here. Use targeted vouchers or tax credits instead of blunt citywide rent caps that shrink supply. strategic response to the BRICS unit. And we need that too. Get our physical house in order so Treasury stay the least ugly asset in a room. And you know how Nate over in Canadian Pepper always talks about, having the least dirty shirt in the laundry basket. Same idea. Maintain rule of law, contract security, and political stability. Things you did not get in many BRICS nations. So that is important. And work with allied countries to strengthen existing dollar-based system while exploring transparent rules-based reforms to reduce weaponization of the currency. That's what's running a lot of people off. They're scared. They've shown, the United States, the European banks, the SWIFT system, they can just grab our money and keep it. So why don't I put my money in there? That's what Russia's saying, and that's why they reached out with BRICS and started fighting the dollar. That and economic warfare against the United States too. So what can you do? What can you personally do? Practical preps for economic shock. Now, this is the part that we here at Green Greg's care most about. How do you not get crushed when this goes sideways? I'll break it into financial preps and physical lifestyle preps. So financial preps. Let's think about this one. Anyway, so these are just general principles. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an economist. I'm not an accountant. I'm an engineer, space engineer at that. But, this is but these are general principles to consider. Reduce high interest debt. So that should be your priority one, to kill credit card debt and other high interest consumer loans. In a downturn, interest eats you alive faster than inflation does because it's going to go up quicker. Now, I had hoped personally to have gotten my credit card debt down more when I sold in Alabama and moved out here, but the moving costs and the cost of reestablishing here has been a little bit higher, so I wasn't able to knock that down as much as I'd like by a long shot. But I got it knocked down some, but I'm still working on it, and I'm working to do that. But I have eliminated a mortgage, so imagine that. So build a cash buffer. Aim for 3 to 6 months of basic expenses in liquid form. A bank plus some physical cash. Banks have technical issues. And at the worst times, hey, just ask anyone who's lived through these glitches, you may not get your money. So, that's why you need to have some of it on hand. Gold you can hold, maybe. But yeah, this is not easy to do. I understand a lot of us are just getting by. We're scraping by. It's hard to take all these steps, but if you can do it, do what you can. Diversify. Don't put everything in one basket. Not all in stocks, not all in real estate, not all in crypto. Consider a mix of productive skills, some tangibles like tools. Hey, I've done entire videos just talking about buying tools, what tools to get, hand tools preferably, in case the grid goes down. Maybe modest physical metals if it fits your situation. Again, gold you can hold, silver. Look how they're storing value. And a lot of you doing that, and that's a real smart move, I think. And long-term food storage. Some exposure to productive assets. That's something else you can look at. Buy some businesses that are stable, land, things like that. And just for land, the case of land, there are those that are saying in a high inflationary time, if you buy land, make sure it's not a variable rate because that's where the interest will kill you. Buy it in fixed rate, and then if inflation really hits, even though you borrowed money, you're going to be ahead. And in fact, there are a few people out there who, I'm not doing this, it's not me, but just something to consider. There are people out there who say your best bet, if you can afford it, is to even take out loans at fixed lower rates with the anticipation the rates are going to go up. And as inflation erodes the value of the dollar, the value you have kind of increases relatively. So you're buying land at a set dollar amount with a fixed interest rate, and then inflation shoots up. then if that's the case, you're ahead. And some people advise that. And I think the guy who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad, he's really extended himself deep into debt, and I think that's what he's banking on. Me, I don't like debt personally. I really don't. But that's how some people, leverage themselves. But you got to be very careful in leveraging and know what you're investing in. And know that that land is still going to be worth something if everything goes real sideways. So you got to have a lot of acumen about you to go down that road. So I'm not advising that. I'm just telling you what some people suggest for that kind of purchase. So, don't chase AI mania. If investment sounds like get rich because of AI, well, that's a red flag. Be especially wary of margin borrowing to invest in a market that's overvalued. So if you are buying land or something else, make sure it's not overvalued. Consider that the value could pop. What does that mean? Maybe housing it in a way to go. Maybe food production land if you're going to buy land. But just you really know what you're doing there. You got to be careful. So know your counterparty risk. Uh, where is your money actually being held? Bank, brokerage, stable coins, some offshore exchange, or other things to think about. Diversify institutions, not just assets. Where's your money at? So don't keep your life savings in an app whose customer support is a Telegram bot named Moon Limbo. Anyway, so many of these things you put your money in, yeah, all you get to do is talk to a Telegram app. Something's wrong with that. Physical and lifestyle preps. Now, this is the Green Grid style. Food security. Build 3 to 12 months of food storage appropriate for your household, however many people you have, at least. Me, I say, if you can do it, 3 to 7 years. Think about when I was a kid, a lot of people put back food for 7 years, canned food, because they knew it could last that long. And they remembered, that the time that Joseph was advised the king of Pharaoh by his dreams to put aside, he said, we're going to have 7 fat years and 7 thin years. Well, there's things that happen on long cycles in terms of environmental catastrophes. I covered that in the video I did recently on cycles of civilizations. So, 3 to 12 months can get you by for the most part. But there could be things that would, if you can afford it, make you want to store more. But do what you can. Guys, you can buy dried beans and rice for basically a day's wage, enough to cover you for a quarter of a year. Think about that. But what I really tell you to do, learn to garden, can, hydrate, and store staples. Now, that's how I started this channel out. So if you can go back to my older videos, you're going to see a lot of stuff about gardening. And it may seem boring at first because I go into great detail about prepping your beds. Why do I do that? Because that's the most important thing to know. Because if the grid goes down, especially, or if the economy goes hard enough sideways, you may not be able to go to the store to buy fertilizer and pesticides and herbicides and seeds even. I was teaching you how to do it on your own without that. And for that, you also want heirloom seeds. So, all things to think about, all things to put into consideration. In a severe inflation or job loss scenario, food storage is better than the savings account paying only 1%. Yeah, you better consider that food storage. Water and energy. Backup water source and filtering. Have some level of have some level of off-grid capability. We're going to be facing an era of brownouts and blackouts, given stress on our grid by all these new AI centers and by the grid being outdated. And then if you look at if we get into a conflict with anyone else, we're hacked to the hilt. They want to take our grid down. So get you solar, generators, wood stove, whatever fits your environment. If you're getting generators, you just better consider the day may come you can't get gasoline. So how are you going to deal with that? Can you make wood gas? Can you make alcohol? Is your generator set up for that? Do you have a propane generator, a giant propane tank? And generators don't last a long time. Solar may be good, but it doesn't fit everywhere. Hey, I got a wood stove. I got generators, and I got a solar panel system that I designed myself. And I saved a ton of money by doing that. And I hope to get some video done on that in not too distant future. But, in an economic shock, utilities get fragile fast. That's why you need to think about this. So, local resilience. Get to know local farmers, tradespeople, and community groups. I've told you in the past on one of my survival videos, grid down survival topics, is that what you really need to do is go out and make friends with your local farmers. Because in the grid down situation, they're not going to have fuel to run their tractors. They might not be able to hire people to run the garden, their farms for them. You might be able to cut a deal with them. Say, hey, look, why don't you just let me share crop this area over here and I'll give you half of whatever I produce. And you just let me use your land. But first, before you go to that level, make friends with them, go there and help them out. Every farmer needs some help. And just make friends with them and say, hey, I'm just wanting to learn about this stuff. Can I help you out in exchange for learning? Something like that. You got to build trust and rapport with them before you can go the next step. But that's something you ought to be doing if you can. Not everybody can do that, but think about it if you can. But at least get to know them, get to know your tradespeople, who can do what, and your community groups. This is what I really say is very important. A strong local networks beats a weak federal promise every time. And back in the old day, that's how it was done. The federal government didn't come to rescue nobody. Local communities took care of their own. And here's what's really important. Skills. Skills. Yeah, and skills. Hands-on skills are valuable in hard times. Repair skills, gardening, first aid, basic construction, and grid stuff, even IT troubleshooting could be a valid skill. In an economic downturn, skills are currency that can't be inflated away. They can't take them from you. As long as you're alive and breathing, whatever you've learned, that's what you've got. So those are very crucial. Hey, can you learn blacksmithing? Some of these old skills that may be important in a grid down situation. Think about it for a little bit. What is it you could do or would like to learn that may be of value when the economy crashes or the grid goes down? But, you need to deleverage your lifestyle. Move your life toward lower fixed costs. Downsize if your house poor. Avoid car loans that eat half of your paycheck and cut recurring subscriptions that don't matter. Hey, I definitely downsized my living condition, and all my cars are antique clunkers, but they're all paid for, and I'm not paying massive car payments. Jeez. Anyway, the goal isn't to be paranoid, it's to be anti-fragile. So if the system hiccups and your family barely notices, hey, you're doing it right. So we're going to wrap this up with a call to action. So let's recap it, my friends. BRICS unit is a early stage gold anchored digital trade instrument, and that makes it real attractive. It's not a magic bullet, but it's a serious warning shot at our dollar system. And one day it may actually be currency. The Shiller, Cape, and Buffett indicators both scream overvalued for the U.S. stocks. The U.S. carries over $38.4 trillion in debt, with interest now larger than our defense spending. States, cities, households, commercial real estate, and renters are all under rising strain. And instead of fixing root causes, many cities are flirting with rent control and other policies that make the supply problems worse. So it isn't about panic. It's about seeing the train coming while there's still time to step off the tracks. or if you're on the train, to get off before it goes over that bridge that's out ahead. And that's what I'm really worried about. So, hey, in my usual fashion, sometimes I like to have a little fun. I was in the Army once upon a time, and we had these marching songs. So I've come up with Greg's economic marching cadence. So maybe this will help you remember things. It's a little funnier than some of the things I just talked about. If you've ever been in the Army or the military, you might like this. AI bits and AI bytes. Tech stocks reach outrageous heights, marching up that bubble hill to pop. They fall and fall they will. OpenAI and Mr. Musk, Meta says, trust us, trust us. But when those servers burn through cash, your 401k might turn to ash. MAGA 7 profits looking thin, while data centers spin and spin. 3-year chips and 5-year math, that's a making of a bubble bath. Then you'll holler, what the heck? When the dollar hits the deck, BRICS roll out their golden game, and Uncle Sam feels economic pain. Debt keeps climbing skyward bound. Interest beats the battleground. States and cities broke again, riding that deficit gravy train. So don't just hold that paper stash. Could turn fast into worthless cash. Some things that hold their value, land and metals, let them ground you. Food inflation's getting crude. Shrink inflation stole half your food. Grow a garden row by row. Fill those jars before you go. When you prep, you ain't afraid. You got skills and plans you made. While the system melts in fear, you'll be marching strong into next year. Sound off, prep smart, sound off, do your part. 1, 2, let's get through. 3, 4, grow a little more. See, I'm not all negative. This is about you getting yourself ready. If you want more deep dives like this one, and step-by-step guides on how to garden, prep, and build resilience in the middle of an economic circus, well, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this isn't just another kitty cat video. Subscribe to Green Greg's here and bang that bell. And click all. I've got more videos coming on food security, off-grid systems, and practical prepping for regular people. And drop a comment below. Which of these 8 risks worries you the most? And what are you doing about it? Because this would be a worthy conversation to have in the comment section below. A lot of you guys got really good skills, really good ideas, and you're doing things, and you can help each other. What I said about community, right now we're online digital community. I'm talking about, your neighbors, but we're a community here too. So comment below. What worries you the most, and what are you doing about it? Because at the end of the day, we just can't control what BRICS, Wall Street, and Washington does. But we can't control what happens in our own backyards. Well, this is Greg Allison with Green Greg's. Stay safe, stay prepped, stay free. And I'm going to put a video right here on what's driving house prices, home prices too high. What's driving the price? Y'all might remember I covered that. Didn't get a lot of views, but that's still germane to what we're talking about here. So click here. And I want to thank everyone for watching. Because you're what makes this channel work. And with that, I'm going to say, Greg out.